The 14th of December, 1944. The Ardennes Forest. 0300 hours. A German infantryman of the 277th Volksgrenadier Division checks his ammunition. He has 10 rounds. His daily ration is a slice of black bread and ersatz coffee. He is cold. This was not a war of tactics. It was a war of material. The central thesis of the Western Front in 1944 is a mathematical certainty. It is found not in battlefield memoirs, but in production ledgers. In that year, the United States produced over 650,000 trucks. Germany produced less than 88,000. This single data point explains the end of the war in Europe. Everything else is commentary. The war was won by the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps. It was won by men like General Brehon B. Somerville, who weaponized American industry, and Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee, who delivered that weapon to the front. A post-war U.S. Army Ordnance Department analysis stated, the German military was a precision instrument of limited operational endurance. The Allied military was a blunt object of near-infinite mass. The German High Command operated under a fatal miscalculation. They believed in the primacy of the superior weapon. They trusted the technological lethality of the Panther and Tiger tanks. The Allied command operated under a different logic, the logic of overwhelming, sustained, and calculated force. Their primary weapon was not a tank. It was the GM CCCKW 2.5-ton truck, the Deuce and a Half. The conflict is therefore not defined by the duel between a Panzer VI Tiger and an M4 Sherman. It is defined by the contrast between a horse-drawn German supply wagon and a 5-truck American convoy carrying 12.5 tons of 105 mm artillery shells. The equation of logistics was simple. For every ton of supplies the Wehrmacht could move 100 kilometers, the Allies could move 70. This is the Quartermaster's War. It is a story told through shipping manifests, fuel consumption tables, and caloric intake charts, a story where the victor was predetermined in the factories of Detroit and on the assembly lines of Akron. The period from August 1944 to January 1945 was the proof, the final, bloody calculation that confirmed the industrial hypothesis. German High Command in late 1944 operated with a calculated confidence. This confidence was not baseless. It was rooted in 4 years of operational success. The doctrine of the decisive battle. German military theory was built on the Kesselschlacht, the battle of encirclement. It prioritized the Schwerpunkt, the decisive point of effort, to achieve rapid, annihilating victories. It did not plan for protracted wars of attrition. It was a doctrine designed to avoid them. A memorandum from the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, OKW, in October 1944 stated, the American operational method is crude. It relies on mass rather than skill. This presents an opportunity for a well-placed, decisive counterstroke. This belief was reinforced by battlefield statistics from the front. The equation of lethality. A single Panzer V Panther tank was statistically expected to destroy 5 M4 Shermans before being neutralized. The Panzer VI Tiger's 88 mm gun could penetrate the frontal armor of a Sherman tank at over 2,000 meters. The Sherman's 75 mm gun could not penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor at any effective combat range. These numbers created a tactical illusion of invincibility. The German command believed this technological edge could offset a vast numerical inferiority. An after-action report from the Panzer Lehr Division following combat in Normandy read, enemy armor is numerous but tactically inept. They attack in predictable waves, making them ideal targets for our long-range gunnery. This was the central German miscalculation. They analyzed the tank. They did not analyze the factory that produced the tank. The logic of production. German industry was a precision instrument. It produced complex, over-engineered weapons systems. The Tiger I tank required approximately 300,000 man-hours to produce. The M4 Sherman required less than 40,000. Reich Minister Albert Speer noted in a private memo to his staff, "We are perfecting masterpieces while the enemy is flooding the field with mass-produced commodities. We are winning the battle of quality but losing the war of quantity." This production disparity was consistently subordinated to frontline doctrine. The German High Command viewed the Allied supply chain as its most significant vulnerability. A *Fremde Heer West intelligence summary from September 1944 concluded, "The enemy's advance is tethered to an absurdly long and fragile supply line. It is a glass jaw waiting for a fist." They saw the Red Ball Express not as a symbol of industrial might, but as a single, exposed artery. The plan for the Ardennes offensive was built entirely on this assumption. It was a plan designed to sever that artery. It depended on capturing Allied fuel depots to sustain its own advance. This was the ultimate expression of German military hubris. They believed a single, brilliant tactical blow could negate a global economic reality. September 1944, the German West Wall. The Allied advance halted. The halt was not a product of German resistance. It was a product of physics. Patton's Third Army had outrun its supply chain. His tanks were running on fumes. The German command interpreted this pause as weakness, a failure of the Allied logistical system. A report from Field Marshal Walter Model to OKW read, "The enemy's momentum is broken. His supply lines are in chaos. We now have the opportunity to stabilize the front and inflict punishing losses." This was a fundamental misreading of the situation. The Allies did not have a logistical failure. They had a logistical problem. Problems are solvable. Failures are systemic. The American solution was the Red Ball Express. It was not a plan. It was an act of industrial will. Beginning August 25, 1944, nearly 6,000 GMC trucks began operating on a closed loop of one-way roads. They ran 24 hours a day. At its peak, the Red Ball Express moved 500 tons of supplies to the front daily. This number exceeded the daily logistical capacity of the entire German army group opposing them. The first true confrontation of systems occurred in the Hürtgen Forest. The equation of artillery. U.S. First Army fired over 1.1 million artillery shells during the Battle for Aachen in October. The defending German LXXIV Corps had ammunition allocations for less than 70,000 shells for the same period. The tactical result was inevitable. An after-action report from the U.S. 9th Infantry Division stated, "Enemy strongpoints were not assaulted. They were systematically dismantled by massed artillery fire prior to infantry advance. The infantry's job was to occupy rubble. The shock was tactical. It was felt at the squad level." A captured diary from a grenadier in the German 275th Infantry Division contained a simple entry for October 8th. "The shelling does not stop. We cannot move. We cannot eat. We cannot sleep. We can only die." The caloric deficit was a weapon. Interrogations of prisoners of war by the U.S. First Army's G2 section revealed a consistent pattern. The average daily caloric intake for a German Lanzer was below 1,800 calories. The official ration was 2,000. It was rarely met. The official U.S. Army K ration provided over 3,200 calories. The B ration, served from field kitchens, exceeded 4,000. A G2 summary concluded, "The enemy soldier is suffering from systemic malnutrition. Combat effectiveness degrades by an estimated 30% after 72 hours of sustained contact due to physical exhaustion alone." This logistical disparity manifested in direct combat near Schmidt, Germany. On November 4th, elements of the 116th Panzer Division launched a counterattack against the U.S. 28th Infantry Division. The attack was led by 10 Panzer IVs and 5 Panthers. It was a tactically sound maneuver. It achieved initial surprise. The attack stalled after advancing 800 meters. The cause was not American anti-tank fire. The cause was fuel shortage. A radio intercept from the 116th Panzer's command net recorded the final transmission from the lead tank commander. "We cannot advance. We have no fuel. Repeat, no fuel. Awaiting instructions." There were no instructions. There was no fuel to send. In contrast, the defending American infantry called for air support. Within 15 minutes, P-47 Thunderbolts of the IX Tactical Air Command were on station. They were not vectored to the stalled tanks. They were vectored to the dirt track behind them. They destroyed 2 horse-drawn carts carrying ammunition and a single Opel Blitz truck carrying rations. The German counterattack was not defeated. It was disconnected from its own logistics. The armored spearhead was left to be encircled and destroyed. The post-mortem of engineering. A U.S. Army Ordnance Technical Intelligence team examined the knocked-out Panthers. Their report noted, "The mechanical complexity of the Panther's final drive makes it prone to failure under high torque. However, the critical failure point in this engagement appears to be the simple lack of high-octane gasoline." The report concluded, "We are fighting an army that can build a superb tank, but cannot keep it fueled." This was the inflection point. It was the moment the battlefield confirmed the data from the factory floor. German tactical brilliance was rendered irrelevant by American logistical dominance. The Wehrmacht could still win engagements. It could no longer sustain a successful operation. A letter from a U.S. Army quartermaster, Captain James R. Lowe, to his wife, summarized the new reality. "They say our boys are brave, and they are. But this war isn't being won by bravery. It's being won by gasoline, by spare parts, and by mountains of sea rations. My job is to make sure our mountains are bigger than theirs." The Germans saw the Red Ball Express as an artery to be cut. They failed to understand it was not one artery, it was a circulatory system. And it was pumping the lifeblood of a continent-sized economy directly onto the battlefield. The analysis of the Western Front in 1944 is an exercise in arithmetic. It is not a study of tactics, it is an audit of industrial output. The logic of production. In 1944, American factories produced 49 234 M4 Sherman tanks and its variants. In the same period, German factories produced 5 976 Panther tanks and 1 347 Tiger I and II tanks. The ratio was approximately 7-1 in favor of the Allies for medium and heavy armor alone. A post-war analysis by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey concluded the German command structure was fighting a tactical battle. The Allied command structure was managing an industrial equation. The latter always wins. The equation of labor. The production of a single Tiger II tank required over 300,000 man-hours. The production of an M4A3 Sherman required 38,500. An internal memorandum from the Reich Ministry for Armaments and War Production stated, "We are building instruments of war. The Americans are building weapons. An instrument is precise but difficult to replace. A weapon simply needs to function until the next one arrives from the assembly line." The logic of mobility. In 1944, the United States produced 659 079 trucks. Germany produced 87 450. By late 1944, over 60% of the German Army's logistical and artillery transport on the Western Front was horse-drawn. A report from the quartermaster of the German 7th Army noted, "A horse requires 12 pounds of fodder per day, whether it is moving or idle. It is vulnerable to artillery and air attack. It is a logistical liability we can no longer afford but cannot replace." The doctrine of engineering. German design philosophy prioritized technological superiority. This resulted in complex, over-engineered systems. The Panther tank's interleaved road wheels and sophisticated final drive offered superior cross-country performance, but were a maintenance nightmare. Field repairs were nearly impossible. American design philosophy prioritized reliability and ease of maintenance. The M4 Sherman used a modular design. Its engine could be replaced in the field in under 4 hours. A U.S. Army Ordnance Corps technical report stated, The Sherman tank is a suboptimal combat platform against German heavy armor. It is, however, a superlative logistical platform. It is reliable, easily repaired, and available in decisive numbers. The equation of training. By mid-1944, a U.S. Army Air Forces fighter pilot arrived in theater with over 350 hours of flight time. A new Luftwaffe pilot was fortunate to have 110. This deficit was a direct result of the Allied bombing campaign against German synthetic fuel production. There was not enough aviation fuel for adequate training. From the interrogation of Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, JG-26, "My first time flying the 109 in combat was my fourth time flying it at all. We were taught to fire and conserve fuel. The Americans were taught to fight. The logic of fuel." Between May and September 1944, Allied strategic bombing reduced Germany's synthetic fuel output by over 75%. A Panther tank consumed 7.5 liters of gasoline per kilometer on roads. An M4 Sherman consumed 2.4 liters. An OKW directive from October 1944 allocated fuel to panzer divisions for limited offensive operations only. Defensive actions were to be conducted from static positions. The tank was being reduced to a fixed pillbox by the enemy's industrial capacity. The equation of firepower. In the third quarter of 1944, U.S. industry produced over 24 million artillery shells of 105 mm caliber or greater. Total German production for the same period was less than 9 million. This disparity allowed U.S. Army artillery to employ massed time-on-target barrages, a technique that required enormous ammunition expenditure. A report from the U.S. 4th Infantry Division's artillery commander noted, "Our mission is not to support the infantry. Our mission is to obliterate the grid square the infantry intends to occupy." The equation of sustenance. The mandated daily field ration for a U.S. soldier was over 300 calories. The official German ration was 2,000 calories. By winter 1944, the average frontline soldier received less than 1/700. A U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps study on prisoner of war health concluded, the average German infantryman is operating at a persistent caloric deficit, leading to measurable degradation in physical stamina and cognitive function after 48 hours of sustained combat. These were not isolated statistics. They were the interconnected components of a single overwhelming system. A system of production, supply, and maintenance that made the tactical performance of any single weapon irrelevant. The German war machine was a finely tuned engine, but it was running on an empty tank. The 16th of December 1944. 0530 hours. The Ardennes Forest. Operation Wacht am Rhein commenced. It was Germany's final strategic offensive in the West. The plan was a direct reflection of German military doctrine. It was a high-risk, high-reward thrust designed to achieve a decisive outcome. The objective was the port of Antwerp. Its capture would sever the primary Allied supply artery. Its success was predicated on a single, non-negotiable variable: captured fuel. The equation of the gamble. The operational plan allocated just enough fuel for the armored spearheads to reach the Meuse River, approximately 100 kilometers. From there, the advance would be sustained by captured Allied fuel dumps. A directive issued to the 6th Panzer Army stated, "The rapid seizure of enemy fuel depots is a primary objective, equal in importance to the destruction of enemy forces." The spearhead of the 6th Panzer Army was Kampfgruppe Piper, a combat group of the 1st SS Panzer Division. It was equipped with 42 Tiger II tanks, 42 Panthers, and supporting armored vehicles. It represented the apex of German armored technology. The initial assault achieved complete tactical surprise. Piper's force advanced over 20 kilometers on the first day, shattering the lines of the U.S. 99th Infantry Division. This was the doctrine of the *Schwerpunkt* in action, a concentrated point of effort creating a catastrophic breach. Simultaneously, other German units advanced toward a critical road junction, the town of Bastogne, Belgium. By December 20th, elements of the U.S. 101st Airborne Division and Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division were encircled in Bastogne. The German command saw a tactical opportunity, a classic Kesselschlacht, a battle of encirclement. They misidentified the nature of the target. Bastogne was not a tactical problem for the Allies, it was a logistical test case. The Siege of Bastogne. The German commander, General Heinrich von Luttwitz, demanded the surrender of the American forces. The American commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, issued a one-word reply, "Nuts." This response has been recorded by history as an act of defiance. It is more accurately analyzed as a statement of logistical confidence. McAuliffe knew his position was not isolated. It was merely temporarily disconnected from ground supply. The German position was fundamentally different. Their entire offensive was becoming disconnected from its source. While German forces laid siege to Bastogne, Kampfgruppe Peiper's advance stalled. The halt did not occur due to American armored counterattacks. It occurred near the village of La Glaise. The cause was fuel exhaustion. A radio log entry from Peiper's command vehicle, dated December 21st, stated, "Fuel levels critical. All vehicles have less than 20 kilometers of range. Awaiting resupply, cannot advance." No resupply was available. The German logistical system behind the front was already collapsing under Allied air attack. The arithmetic of air supply. On December 23rd, the weather cleared. The Allied air forces responded. The response was not primarily tactical. It was logistical. Operation Repulse commenced. C-47 Skytrain transport aircraft began to resupply the besieged garrison at Bastogne. On the first day, 241 C-47s dropped 144 tons of supplies. This included 157, 632 rounds of .30 caliber ammunition, 536 rounds of 81 mm mortar ammunition, and 200 units of blood plasma. A diary entry from Private Kurt Reimer, 2nd Panzer Division, outside Bastogne, December 24th. "We watched their transport planes fly over us all day. They drop supplies to the Americans. We have not had a hot meal in 3 days. The cold is constant." The contrast in material states was absolute. The German besiegers were critically low on artillery ammunition, food, and medical supplies. The American besieged were being systematically resupplied with all three. The logistical equation had inverted the tactical situation. The besiegers were starving, while the besieged were preparing to counterattack. Meanwhile, Kampfgruppe Peiper's situation became untenable. Completely out of fuel, the unit was forced to abandon its vehicles. The final tally of abandoned equipment at La Glaise was a statistical summary of the offensive's failure. 39 Tiger II tanks, 34 Panthers, 11 self-propelled guns. These were the most advanced armored fighting vehicles in the world. They were rendered inert by a lack of gasoline. From the post-action interrogation of SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper, "My tanks were the best in the world. An army without fuel is not an army, it is a collection of scrap metal." The battle for Bastogne ended on December 26th, when elements of Patton's Third Army broke the encirclement. The Ardennes offensive officially ended on January 25, 1945. The balance sheet of attrition. German losses were catastrophic and irreplaceable. They lost over 600 tanks and assault guns. The majority were abandoned due to mechanical failure or lack of fuel. The Luftwaffe lost over 500 aircraft. Many of its remaining veteran pilots were killed. Human casualties were estimated between 67,000 and 100,000. American losses were severe, approximately 89,000 casualties, including 19,000 killed. Over 700 tanks were lost. The difference was industrial. The American losses, while high, were replaceable. By January 1945, replacement tanks, trucks, and soldiers were already arriving in theater from the United States. Germany had no such capacity. The armored forces expended in the Ardennes could not be reconstituted. A post-war assessment by Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt stated the outcome in simple terms. The attack was a success, but the material superiority of the enemy was too great. The primary failure was the assumption that we could supply an operation of this scale. We could not. The Battle of the Bulge was not a battle. It was an audit. It was the final accounting of two opposing systems of warfare. One system prioritized the tactical perfection of the spearhead. The other prioritized the industrial resilience of the supply chain. The result was a mathematical certainty. The Ardennes offensive did not break the Wehrmacht. It was a statistical confirmation that it was already broken. The material cost of the operation stripped the German army in the West of its final offensive capacity. The legacy was immediate and absolute. From January 1945 onward, the Wehrmacht was no longer capable of launching a strategic-level operation on the Western Front. It could only react. It could only delay. The post-mortem of doctrine. In his post-war interrogations, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt was unequivocal. The material superiority of the enemy was a fact that could not be overcome by operational planning. We had tactical victories. We could not achieve a strategic result. This was the final verdict on a military philosophy that had prized operational brilliance above all else. German doctrine was designed to win a decisive battle. It had no mechanism to win a decisive war of production. The Allied perspective was one of methodical validation. In a 1946 address to the Army War College, Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee stated the principle plainly. Our mission in the communications zone was not to support the war, it was to constitute the war. The movement of tonnage was the ultimate expression of our national will. The war in Europe was a conflict between two fundamentally different systems. The German system was a precision instrument. It was designed for a short, violent war, where superior technology and training would prevail before resource limitations became critical. The Allied system was an industrial engine. It was designed for a protracted, attritional war, where the ability to replace men and machines was the primary determinant of victory. Military historian Trevor N. Dupuy later quantified this distinction in his quantitative methodology. He concluded that the material superiority of the Allies provided a combat effectiveness multiplier that consistently negated the qualitative advantages of German armor and anti-tank weaponry. The numbers were the story. This understanding became the cornerstone of post-war Western military thought. The primacy of logistics. The study of supply chain management, resource allocation, and industrial mobilization became central to military science. The lesson of 1944 was that a nation's ability to project power was directly proportional to its ability to sustain it. A veteran of the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, Colonel Henry C. Newton, summarized this in his memoirs. The tankers and the infantrymen won the battles. But the war was won by the men who counted the crates, who calibrated the fuel gauges, and who signed the shipping manifests. It was a war of paperwork. This was not hyperbole. It was a statement of fact. The conflict was ultimately defined by the contrast between its iconic technologies. The German Tiger tank was a masterpiece of engineering. It was a symbol of tactical lethality. It was also a logistical black hole, demanding immense resources to build, fuel, and maintain. The American GM-CCCKW truck was a masterpiece of mass production. It was a symbol of logistical endurance. It was simple, reliable, and available in overwhelming numbers. One was a weapon designed to win a firefight. The other was a tool designed to win a war. The experience of the frontline soldier provided the final, granular proof. A 1988 oral history project recorded the testimony of former Staff Sergeant Walter Morrison, 10th Armored Division. We knew they had better tanks, we saw what their 88s could do, but we also saw them on the side of the road, out of gas. We saw their horse-drawn wagons. And every day, we saw our own trucks, an endless line of them, bringing up more shells, more food, more everything. You can't beat that. This was the soldiers' understanding of the industrial equation. The German war machine was not defeated by a superior strategy. It was rendered obsolete by a superior system of supply. It was a system that could project not just firepower, but sustenance. The ability to provide a hot meal to a soldier in a foxhole was a logistical achievement as significant as the production of a tank. It demonstrated a capacity for organization that the enemy could no longer match. The final analysis of the war on the Western Front is not found in the narrative of battles. It is found in the columns of an industrial ledger. It demonstrates that the capacity to wage modern war is defined not by the quality of a nation's weapons, but by the depth of its industrial base. The war was a mathematical problem. The Allies had the superior formula.